Great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lee Sackett, who'll be giving the keynote address today. Lee has made an outstanding contribution to anthropology and the native title field. He conducted his PhD research at Uluna in 1972 to 1973, supervised formally by Bob Tonkinson and informally by Ron Byrne. He was awarded the PhD at the University of Oregon in 1975. For the next 20 years, Lee taught anthropology, principally relating to Indigenous Australians, at the University of Adelaide. After leaving the university, he took up the position as manager, Land Tenure, Central Land Council, where he inspired a team of young anthropologists, including 4 who are here today: Sarah Bell, Susan Donaldson, Kevin Murphy, and Sean Hallwood. I was fortunate to work with Lee on the Mount Beach land claim, one of the 3 land claims that Lee completed during his 3 years he was at the CLC. Since leaving the CLC, Lee practiced as a consultant anthropology, specialising in native title claim research, reviewing claim materials for several rep bodies, and appearing as expert witness in numerous contested claims. He retired in 2023, but is here today, fortunately for us, and in his talk, he'll be addressing some of the concerns voiced by younger anthropologists about their future in the native title arena. Please welcome Dr. Lee Sackett.
I'm starting with a question, that being, have you ever made a faux pas so ginormous that you talk about it decades later, and other people talk about it decades later? A real magnitude 9 cock-up. No? Nobody's done that? A memorable screw-up for me, and by no means my first nor my last, occurred back in the late 1960s, long time ago, when I was asked to be best man at the wedding of a fellow I've known since our primary school days. This was well before the internet and Dr. Google, so I took my lead from films and TV shows. That's probably not a good way to go, as you hear. Anyway, it was clear to me from watching sitcoms and rom-coms that my job as best man was to get the groom suitably plastered, which I did. Job done. Needless to say, along the way, I got myself suitably plastered as well. So in the end, he and I remained only thoughtfully aware of anything else my role required of me. To this day, I do not recall tending to the wedding rings, telling compromising stories about the groom, or the bride for that matter, proposing toast to the newlyweds, assisting the partner for their honeymoon. None of these things happened, at least in my mind. If they did, I was too drunk out of my mind to recall them, tell you about them here today. For my keynote address, I'll not be plying you with straw and drink, although I wish I could. And I'll be remaining sober myself, at least for this little period. What I'm going to do, instead of doing what I did then, which was kind of ignoring protocols, is tell you about some research I did regarding, well, first I'll tell you about the wedding. There's the wedding. You can't tell it there, but we were not really healthy at that point. We became less and less healthy as the day wore on. But what I've done today, unlike when I was involved in that wedding, was to do a bit of research on the subject of keynote addresses. And my research in this regard has indicated to me that one of the things I should be doing is getting you ready to listen to, eagerly listen to, the presenters who will come behind me. My research also indicates that I should know my audience. Well, I know a number of you personally, and I know generally what you're doing, for the most part, I suppose. So that's done, tick. My research further tells me that a potent way of getting you to attend to what I'm saying and think about what I'm saying is to tell stories like that about my pathetic experience as a best man. Mind you, I'll be the star of a number of my stories, but not all of them, don't worry. But the stage is mine, hey. in line with my research findings, I'm enlivening my presentation with the odd slide. Now, I viewed some of videos, or whatever you call them, online stuff, about people giving keynote addresses and other forms of presentations. And from this, it becomes clear that some of the presenters had access to these U-Butte microphones. You go, not like this, the little ones that go around your neck, and you can wander around the stage, gesticulate wildly, and even play the guitar, as Garth Brooks is doing. My research also indicated that some presenters get access to what are called presidential teleprompters. So you get the screens there, and you have your text there, and you can look out at the audience all the time. It looks like you really know what you're talking about, when in fact you just read the text. It looks like I'm being shortchanged here because I don't have the microphone nor the teleprompter. Speaking of being shortchanged, I, through my research, learned that keynote speakers sometimes receive payment for their contribution. Now, this is something that Julie failed to mention when she contacted me about doing this today. Maybe something I'll take up with her later. A theme, or at least a strong sub-theme of today's sessions, is something I'll be zeroing in, and that is encouraging you, those of you who are not already doing it, to think about becoming full-time consultants. To leave your comfort zone of the rep bodies, or the museums, the universities, or wherever else you might be working, and join the ranks, the storied ranks, in fact, of consultant anthropologists. And this, I'll be urging you who have not already done so to think seriously about making this step. Pick up the reins dropped by me in my retirement, and the likes of Basil Sampson, who recently died, but died in the saddle, as it were. People are not just retiring, some of them are retiring permanently from life. In 2023, the Center for Native Title Anthropology published the results of a survey of the employment of anthropologists in Australia. Now, many of you participated in this, and it was an endeavor to find out the lay of the land, more accurately, assess the lay of the land of applied anthropology in Australia. If you've not looked at the results, I encourage you to do so. And some of you might even like to compare and contrast what was found in 2023 with earlier endeavors in this regard, one by David Martin in 2004, and another by Pam McGough in 2017. As my A1, I read AI as A1, the Roman numeral. I get confused all the time. But AI, I have assisted in my computer. I don't know where it came from. It just pops up occasionally. And it really blandly paints the recent surveys in the following way. The survey highlights the diverse experiences and challenges, I come back to challenges, faced by anthropologists in Australia, with a focus on improving support and professional development within the field. Well, it does a lot more than that, the survey. It delineates the range of concerns that you as young anthropologists, everybody is young in my view, because I must be the oldest in the room. If I'm not, heaven forbid. Now, I turn now to one of the challenges that was highlighted by this survey. And it's the, as you can see, the concerns about a career in anthropology, not just native title, but in anthropology generally. As you see, 65% of respondents indicated that there were concerns on their part regarding their career in the realm. I can't pick up on all the sorts of concerns. There were many types of concerns listed, but I want to pick up on 4 of them. There were concerns expressed for the future of the discipline of anthropology itself, concerns as to whether you could do the job as you age, concerns regarding career progression, and concerns about moving from in-house work to consulting, which is one I'll talk about as well, all these concerns, but particularly the latter one. The first of these relates to what might be said to be the elements most basic to anthropology, this being training and qualifications in the discipline itself. For example, one person responded in the survey by saying that they view anthropology as a diminishing arena, diminishing of anthropology as a discipline within the universities. And I think we can all think about that and have some experience with that first or second hand. It certainly is the case that anthropology is not as robust as it once was. Towards the latter part of last year, Stephen Matchett had a couple of articles in the Australian. I read the Australian because it tells me a lot about things. It's not the same. I like the editorial content. A disclaimer, I guess you'd call it. The first of these was entitled, "It's Time to Explain Humanity's Worth." And the second one was entitled, "Plain Language. No one wants to study Greek, Italian, or Indonesian."
Nonsense.
Pardon me?
Nonsense.
In his first article, Matchett argues that in essence, the taxpayers, and thereby the politicians following them, not leading, following, do not value humanities. And it's clear in his article that he's including arts within humanities, or at least seeing them as synonymous. The arts humanities are not valued, and consequently, degrees are amongst the most expensive in the university. Why are they the most expensive? Because those courses are deemed not worthwhile in comparison to other subjects fighting for scarce dollars in the university sector. As Matchett puts it, and I quote him, "More money for humanities is hard to sell among the massive voters who doubt the world will end if students do not read Middlemarch or aren't across the new thinking in Taylor Swift studies." And he says in this in regards to that last point, "Snort not." Someone was snorting. There are scholarly seminars already. In the second article, Matchett says it all. The title says it all. Plain language. Nobody wants to study Greek, Italian, or Indonesian. It seems that worrying for us, anthropology could be included in that. While the discipline appears to be alive and thriving in some universities, and here I'm thinking, at least to a degree, of ANU and UQ, it has all but disappeared from other universities. And here I'm thinking of UWA and Adelaide. Universities that I know used to have strong departments in anthropology. When I first arrived in Australia, I was, as part of my fellowship, attached to the anthropology department of UWA. At the time, the department had not full daytime lecturing staff and a number of part-time tutors. I was one of the tutors for a little while. Perhaps because of my own interest in the field, the department seemed to center on, revolve around, if you will, Ron and Catherine Burt, or Dr. C and Prof as they were termed. As many of you will know, in 2021, the Department of Anthropology at UWA, which was founded in 1963, was discontinued, quote, as a result of what were said to be very low student enrollments. Interestingly, last year's AAS meetings were held at UWA. That's our premier anthropology society, held meetings at a university that had disbanded its anthropology department. One of the commentators thought that was beyond ironic, and I agree. Turning to anthropology at Adelaide, where I taught for 20 years, and I had an office on the left. There's some trees on the left as you're looking at this picture that you can't see, but it was behind that. It was a lovely, large office, very university-like. It didn't last very long. That it was overtaken by somebody else, but it was nice at the time. The Department of Anthropology at Adelaide was founded in 1973. By the mid to late 70s, the department had 9 lecturing staff and 4 full-time tutors. For a time, it was a vibrant place, very vibrant. In fact, for some, it was the vibrant place to be in anthropology in the country. For the most part, the teaching staff were like the department itself early in their careers. The founding professor was 33 at the time of his appointment, probably a bit too young. If you're watching Bruce, it was a bit too young. In like manner, the rest of us were relatively young. In recent years, what was the Department of Anthropology has become the Department of Anthropology and Development Studies. At the same time, the number of anthropologists on staff has shrunk from 9 or 13, depending on how you want to count them, to 4. Now, I'm all in favor of change, but it strikes me that this decimation, both that occurred at UWA and at Adelaide, is change of very worrying kind indeed. And I think David might have some things to say about this as we go on today. Imagine, just at the first level, imagine the impact it's had on the lives of students and staff. No jobs, and the students were left without their majors or supervisors. Recognizing this, I suppose we in Native Title can take heart from the fact that what we do is far from divining meaning from the intros of Middlemarch, or exploring how we might advance Taylor Swift's studies from red, 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 to green, 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 green. If you know her songs, you'll catch it. Turning to the second of your concerns about working in Native Title, some of you raised the hoary old matter of age. One of you said, aging is an issue when engaging in high levels of field work. I'm worried my body may not be able to live up to this kind of work in another few years. In reply, I could say something about how ageist and insulting this sounds to me, but being a mellow old fart, I'll let it ride. I do confess, though, that there were times when I was atop a troop carrier, arranging the swags, tying them down, and the troop carrier is going like this, and I'm up there, I was thinking at times, I'm way too old to be doing this sort of thing, working meters above ground in that way. But in the end, though, I would counter concerns about age by noting that in the Aboriginal context, particularly those with which I'm familiar, apparent maturity and knowledge have been a definite plus, a positive element. Think about it. While we frequently hear the terms auntie and uncle, they do not correlate strictly with age. But it's certainly the case that respected senior women and men are the ones the younger people turn to for certain kinds of information and advice. Information and advice regarding the appropriateness of a particular partner. Is it incestuous in the view of the older people or not? Places of ancestral activity. The old people know that, not the young ones. Creative stories, and so forth. By extension, in my experience, there is a degree of cachet that extends to what appear to be knowledgeable outsiders. One of my earliest brushes with the law, what occurred in Walloona, I was asked to produce a report and appear in court as an expert in regards to 5 men who had been charged with murder of another man. The facts were, briefly, the 5 murderers were part of a larger group of men who had spent the night engaging in ritual activity and were meeting that morning to discuss the forthcoming ritual activities. As they were doing so, they were approached and interrupted by a man who had spent the previous night drinking. This man was carrying a shield and 2 boomerangs in his left hand, had 2 hitting sticks tucked into his hair belt, and 2 wooden clubs, and a 3rd boomerang in his right hand, which he was aggressively shaking at the men. As he neared the group, he hurled insults and yelled words that only initiated men are supposed to hear. This caused the women and children who were in the area to scamper off into the distance. To cut a long story short, one of the men that was assembled stood up and asked the man to go have a sleep. It was the common way of getting people to do something that you couldn't order them, but you asked them to go have a sleep. Well, for his trouble, the man that asked the other fellow to go have a sleep was clubbed unconscious into the ground. No sooner did this happen when 4 other men jumped up. 2 of the men that jumped up were brothers, actual brothers, of the man who had been knocked unconscious and two were classificatory brothers of the man who had done the knocking. They attacked the man in various ways, some not very vigorously, others more vigorously. In the event, two men stuck him in one thigh each with spears. The latter injury, one of the spears nicked the femoral artery. And this went untreated, unnoticed by the flying doctor service, and he was put on a flight. And as you know, or may not know, when you go up, you can easily pump out a lot of blood because you're going up higher in the air, less pressure on you. So he bled out before he reached the hospital. A couple of days before their trial was to begin for murder, each man met the Aboriginal lead barrister who was going to be defending them. The allocation of a barrister to each defendant immediately led this one man being the envy of the other four. His assigned barrister was John Toohey. So that's, oh, I forgot to do that. That's Wooloona in the map there, a lot of other places as well. The slide of John Toohey, this was after I knew it, but nonetheless, that's a slide of the man. Now, he would go on to become the Aboriginal Land, the initial inaugural Northern Territory Aboriginal Land Commissioner, and a lot of other things as well. Now, it was obvious to the men, all five men, that this lawyer, John Toohey, would get his client off. There was no doubt in their minds. This assessment was not based on the things that John Toohey had done up to that point, nor did the fact that he would someday become more important yet. It was based solely on the fact that Toohey had white-gray hair. In the men's eyes, as in the Western Desert more generally, gray, white hair is a signal of a knowledgeable old person, a tilde. There are a few of us in the room right now, in fact. Age, grayness, knowledge. In the eyes of the men, and they were saying roughly this sort of thing. The wigs that some of those lawyers wear, they fool some people, but they don't fool us. We know proper wisdom when we see it. As it happens, the men were correct, if for the wrong reasons. As the trial progressed, the case against the men began to unravel. The judge did not allow their statements to the police in evidence. He was of the view that they didn't know what they were talking about when they gave these statements. They hadn't been warned. There was no translator to deal with them, etc. The two witnesses called by the Crown gave conflicting and contradictory evidence, so there wasn't much happening in the way of a nice straight line towards conviction. In fact, one of the accused, one of the murderers, was unconscious when the murder was happening. He was the one that was knocked out. Lastly, it was apparent that the accused had no common intention. If anything, their actions could be read as self-defense. Against this background, the barristers, led by Toohey, moved for an acquittal, and this the judge quickly directed the jury to vote. My point here, I suppose, is don't let age be a barrier. Treat age as your friend. Enjoy it while you have it. Use age, apparent age if you like, to your advantage. Now, I kept it going until I was 80, and I'll be sorely disappointed if I hear any of you have quit before that age. I'll now turn to and treat the third and fourth categories of your concerns as something of a package deal. Thirdly, if your responses are anything to go by, close to half of you are concerned that, or perceive that you have little or no career opportunity within the structures of the native title bodies that you work in. One of you, in fact, wrote, "Right now, there isn't any career path." The fourth area of concern I want to discuss, and you'll see how it relates, is your perceptions as something of a gaping chasm between in-house anthropology and consulting anthropology. As one respondent said, there are really not many options. I see the next step would be moving into consultancy, but I have no idea how to do this. it would be great if there was support to make this transition easier. I'll treat these two categories in a sense as one because they are strongly linked. In fact, one of you, I don't know if you're here, but one respondent to the survey said, I have no further options for promotion as an anthropologist within the NTRB where I work. I'm concerned that to further my career and build my skills and experience for higher level complex research and expert work, I will have to relocate or potentially undertake further study for a PhD. If you too hold such views, then contrary to the sentiment expressed in these quotes, becoming a consultant anthropologist could be just right for you. Trust me, I'll show you how. In my experience, those who brief consultants are not at all concerned where those consultants reside. Kingsley Palmer, who is he here? No, I don't think so. Anyway, many of you will know Kingsley, perhaps have worked with him. For a time lived here in Brisbane, but worked at that time in Western Australia, South Australia, and the Northern Territory. Sandra Pinnell, who many of you will know, lives outside of Albany in Western Australia, but has worked in Queensland, Western Australia, and New South Wales. Now, rather than being your residence or place of residence an impediment to consulting, where you basically you rack up a lot of frequent flyer miles. I did. As for the necessity of having a PhD, well, I would say tell that to Wendy Ash, Jeff Bagshaw, Kim McCall, Petronella, and many, many others who do not have PhDs and have worked successfully in the consulting arena for many years, decades in some cases. This is not to suggest that someone with a BA or honors degree in which the ink is barely dry should contemplate jumping into the consulting field. A period of learning comes in handy, like the learning that you're ideally getting working in rep bodies. Consider working in rep bodies as an apprenticeship, learning the ropes. For anyone keen on becoming involved in researching and writing up claims, but is loath to leave a rep body, consider talking to your PLO or CEO about your ability to work alongside a consultant, or perhaps take out a claim yourself in-house or supervised. Now, in this regard, Carmen Cummings and Nisa Colhoun, both then at Yamaji Open Aboriginal Corporation, research and produce claim materials with consultant David Martin in relationship to a native title claim in the Gascoyne region of WA. And regarding in-house anthropologists working wholly on their own on claim materials, researching and writing up the materials, Robert Graham, for one, has researched a number of claims, sometimes on his own, sometimes with fellow researcher Belinda Liebelt in the South Australia area. Finally, if you do not see how you might become a consultant, or worse yet, do not see a support in doing so, to paraphrase our former Prime Minister, we are here to help. There are a number of consultants floating around this gathering. Buttonhole them, grill them, find out what they're doing, how you might get to become what they are. Beyond this, CNTA actually exists largely to enable consulting, the birth of new consultants. The bottom line here is do not let perceived obstacles, such as where you live, your degree attainment, or a murky path to consulting, dissuade you from your goal of becoming a consultant anthropologist. As it happens, one of this afternoon's sessions is called Transitioning to Consultancy. According to my Macquarie Dictionary, trusty friend, transition is to pass from one position, stage to another. These days, phrases and sentences containing the noun transition and the verb transitioning are everywhere. When did this all start? Think about it. The press is full of transitionings. The people in the United States are said to be transitioning to a Trump presidency, and the rest of the world is as well. Here at home, we are said to be transitioning to green energy. At the same time, green energy transition is a huge challenge, we're told. Some are resisting the green transition. And in the face of those resistors, transition momentum must not be sacrificed. Well, I find the ways the press captures and describes all this transitioning at the global, national, and social level. What really interests me is the transitioning that occurs at the more individual level. For instance, there's transitioning out of the swaddle. I was never in a swaddle, but some people obviously were. Transitioning to school. My granddaughter is doing that right now. Transitioning to real jobs, which the Indigenous Affairs Minister is getting us to do. Not us, but Aboriginal people in general. Gender transitioning. Transitioning to retirement. And on the transition needs to go. As anthropologists, we are, or at least we should be, full bottle of transitions and transitioning. Think, for instance, this will take you way back to your undergraduate days. Arnold van Gennep's Rites of Passage. His ideas were in regards to ritual, but it could be more generally phrased as phases of separation, transition, and reincorporation. Victor Turner's ritual process, which also explores those three phases: separation, liminality, and reincorporation. You remember them now, but I mentioned it, don't you? Yeah. In thinking about all these transitions and the like, I recall being a participant observer of a young fellow's rite of transition from boyhood to manhood at Walloona in the early 70s. The young fellow who was the center of attention had been grabbed, taken from the context of the mundane ordinary, and removed away. He was separated physically and socially from the wider community. And a couple of men and I were I just happened to be there, assigned to look after him until the initiating procedures got underway in a full-blown way that evening. So the other men were off arranging things. At one point during our looking after the young fellow, I asked him quietly if he had any idea what was going to be happening to him, what was coming next. He looked at me like I'd been beamed down from somewhere far away. In a way, it was precisely what had happened. And whispered back, "You're going to cut off a bit of me cock." And right he was. And it was not something he was particularly looking forward to, I can assure you. To this point in his life, as an uninitiated lad, or as a boy, as they were termed in those days, life had not been bad at all. He had few responsibilities, really had almost no responsibilities. He lived near his parents. Mom always fixed food for him and so forth. And he spent most of his energies, if not all of his energies, chasing young women for sex. For a young fellow, what's not to like about that? Why would you want to change that? His forthcoming manhood would not be bad either. He would be able to take a wife, join the other men in learning about and interacting with the dreaming world. It wasn't the boyhood or manhood that was the worry. It was the getting from one to the other that was troubling him. Similarly, I suspect that it's not one state or the other that may be troubling you about possibly transitioning to consultancy. You already occupy a position of non-consultant, at least many of you, working as in-house anthropologists, and no doubt have some familiarity with consultants, having worked with or talked to them at various points in time. You may even have thought at times that consulting was a doable job. I could do that. That's what I thought at one point. Yeah, I can do that. I know. And the money is certainly better. The working conditions are better. You're at home, picking your own hours, sitting at your desk, driving your reports, or off engaging in research. No pushy supervisors are standing behind you watching you work. In my experience, the young initiate is not like the young initiate. It is not one state or the other that is problematic for some of you. It is the betwixt and between that is problematic. Well, my friends, that is what transitioning is all about. If transitioning to consultancy was stress-free and painless, everyone would be doing it. there'd be no room for you when you got there. It's a process. You got to do it. Some people don't want to do it. Others do. And as I think I've suggested, and what some of you have heard, some of you may, in confronting the idea of moving out of the house to consulting, you may be imagining hurdles that don't need to be jumped, such as where you live, PhD, and so forth. In concluding, I would say to those of you who are seriously contemplating moving out from in-her house to consulting, contemplate no more. Just do it. And once you've done it, give yourself a big tick or maybe a Nike swoosh for your achievement. Thank you very much.